And joining me now to look ahead is our great panel, Democratic strategist Basil Smikle and Noah Rothman, editor at Commentary Magazine. Thanks so much to both of you for joining me on this Monday after Christmas. Hope you all are having a great holiday season. Basil, let's just start right there. You heard Steve Kornacki break down why this midterm election season was better than expected for Democrats. It had everything to do with independent voters. What does that mean moving forward? What are the lessons that you take from that?
Well, the lessons for me are very specifically that that voters in this country wanted to get back to a sense of normalcy. That's what they elected Joe Biden to do. They were, I think, the concerns around threats to democracy were partly, in large part, a result of this uninterrupted narrative that Democrats were able to tell about what happened on January 6th and everything and everyone associated with that. Going forward, though, there are two concerns. One, that 2024 is likely to be a much worse year for Democrats in the Senate because there's so many seats that are up, number one. And then number two, something that I think is concerning not just nationally but locally. Take a state like New York, which is a blue state. The Democrats have the largest voting bloc, but the second highest voting bloc right now are independent voters. They outnumber Republicans in this state, which suggests to me that a lot of young voters, lapsed voters, new voters don't have that strong party affiliation, and then dips in popularity for a presidential candidate, for example, are going to resonate when we talk to a lot of these young voters. They saved us in 2022, but there's going to have to be a stronger appeal to them going forward. Otherwise, we lose those voters.
No, let me allow you to jump in here and also frame the question for you this way. Given the results of the midterm elections, do you think that Republicans and Democrats are going to be able to find some legislative common ground moving forward? Republicans take control of the House. Do you think there are lessons to be learned, for example, in these midterm election results? Or do you think we're just going to see more divided government?
I think we're going to see more divided government. There's always compromise legislation that moves in, even in closely divided Congresses. It's just not especially controversial, and therefore it kind of goes under the radar. The good governance stuff doesn't make the primetime reel. It's the sort of thing that we focus on, but maybe not necessarily those who are engaged in political combat. Basil's absolutely correct. The notion here that Republicans will do better based on the map in 2024 assumes, however, that they do learn the lessons of 2022. We have begun to see some indications that Republicans are prepared to understand what Basil very clearly laid out, that voters now for two consecutive cycles have zoomed in on candidates who, without any conventionality to them, and also even kind of rejected conventionality, like it's a species of complacency, homed in on them like a guided munition and got them out of the political scene. The extent to which you're not seeing a lot of people latch onto, for example, Carrie Lake's narrative in Arizona, that she believes she's got this lost election, this wound that she is trying to salve, that's not really catching on in the way that Donald Trump's claims about 2020 represented the price of admission into national Republican politics. It has begun to fade in resonance and suggests perhaps that the Republican Party is catching on to why it has such an unhappy lot.
I want to talk about one of the issues that is looming large over the Biden administration and, frankly, over the next presidential race as well. That's the issue of immigration. Title 42 could potentially be struck down tomorrow by the Supreme Court. We'll have to see what happens. But, Noah, talk about the implications of that. I mean, there just doesn't seem to be an appetite to deal with the broader underlying issues of immigration or any real ability for the two sides to work together on this issue to fix, what are the root causes of it with some big sweeping piece of legislation. And so you're seeing these little, what each side might describe as a Band-Aid and flashpoints.
That's exactly right. Congress has had ample opportunity to deal with some of the legislative matters that that become controversies in themselves. Under the Trump administration, we had a kerfuffle around the Flores settlement, which compels you to do certain things with families who cross the border, and it became a cause célèbre because but the Trump administration was using this as a deterrent, according to the head of the Department of Homeland Security, to deter people by removing children, and that became the narrative of kids in cages. Now, it was an unfair narrative because Congress has the capacity to address the Flores settlement and chose not to. Likewise, we have a pandemic-related policy in Title 42. It's an emergency policy, which is justified by the continuing state of emergency that the Biden administration has extended into 2023. Maybe that's dubious to you or not. The policy itself clearly doesn't deserve to be pandemic policy. It is appreciated almost across the board, especially at the state level in these border states. It's something that should graduate, perhaps, from being an emergency policy into actual policy, and that requires congressional action. Controversial as that may be, Congress does have a job to do.
Basil, what's your take on this? And do you think, I mean, we have been for decades discussing whether Washington will actually be able to deal with the issue of immigration.
They're not. And Noah's right. This has been a political football for, decades. I'm a child of immigrants. I teach students here in New York. Most of the students I teach are children of immigrants. So as I talk about where young people are and how they view the parties and their desire to affiliate with one of them, this is one of the issues where they feel that no one has actually done justice to the policy. The mayor of New York City is talking about now $1 billion needed annually to be able to deal with this crisis. New Yorkers do what New Yorkers do as more and more buses roll in. But the reality is that they are now, the New York City officials, for example, are now complaining that the Biden administration isn't doing enough to support their efforts. And so when you have Democrats calling out other Democrats in this particular political environment, there's a problem. And my fear is that it's not going to get solved anytime soon. And what we're seeing is the politics of cruelty. This is humane treatment. And I think both parties need to come together to talk about what it is to be an American, because it's a terrible example that we're showing these migrants.
Well, we will be watching closely to see what, if anything, the Supreme Court does tomorrow. And of course, this is an issue, again, that is going to loom large over 2024. It comes as President Biden is making his final decisions about whether he's going to officially announce he's running again, and as you have a number of Republican potential candidates having serious discussions themselves. Basil and Noah, thank you for a great conversation. Still to come, the